Okay, another question. Man at the back.
Yeah, this is more for Edgar, I guess. You have a tendency to get into films that sort of at least take American audiences kind of by surprise. And you tend to like blow away the huge blockbuster films. What are the ingredients that you look for in a script, in a screenplay, that make that the nation latch onto it and produces these surprisingly wonderful films that other have big.
Well, I guess the irony is that both me and Joe, I mean, if there's a comparison between like Shaun of the Dead and Attack the Block, is that both of us are kind of inspired by American films. And in a way, both me and Joe kind of around the same age, and we grew up through like a drought of genre movies in the 80s and 90s. There's a lot of kind of like a good tradition of horror films and some sci-fi in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and then it kind of died out in the 80s and 90s big time. So both myself doing Shaun of the Dead and Joe doing Attack the Block was kind of as, not as a response, it's not kind of like a sort of a jab at American blockbusters, it's kind of us trying to do those movies on our own turf. And the funny thing about this is that, Shaun of the Dead is a very North London film, and this is very definitively a South London film. So eventually these will, Shaun and Attack the Block would make a good double bill of like the two sort of different zip codes. So it's not really designed as any kind of satirical swipe. I think it's just I think we get kind of envious. Like 80% of the movies, 90% of the movies shown in British cinemas are American, and and you don't often get to do a lot of genre films in the UK. So that's, I guess, where it comes from. And I think both of us have that kind of fantasy of it happening on our doorstep, like that. The street, Moston Park Road, where was your first day of filming, Joe lives like 30 seconds around the corner. So that's kind of like, it's right on his doorstep. And Shaun of the Dead is where I used to live in North London, or still live in North London. So I think it comes from that really, but it's partly sort of, it's partly envy, I think. So yeah.
I have a question.
Wow, he just, oh yeah, okay, wow. He just went for it. This man does not want to be picked. Okay, question.
So the movie reviewed really well in London, right? But it's so much better here. Did you guys expect that? And if you did, how do we get people like sitting here who love it?
How do you? I should give full disclosure. This is Clint Colbert who bought the movie. But I think what Clint's getting at, I completely ruined the transparency of that question. But okay, so Clint, I'm sorry, I apologize, but I think what essentially you're trying to get, if you love the movie, tell your friends. Get on Twitter. Go and start a riot outside the Chinese theatre. Set fire to a cop car. And don't say I said it.
Better in the United States than it did in
I think it was pretty sort of, I guess kind of British critics are tougher on British filmmakers. That's definitely true. And I think maybe, I think there's a thing as well that people over here just don't see films kind of like in these neighborhoods, like you don't really get them in the UK either. So I hope it's kind of like a breath of fresh air for American audiences. But basically, tell all your friends otherwise.
Do you think it's just like the Americans have better taste?
Say yes. Just
I
say
think
yes.
it's true the Americans have better taste. Would you agree with that, John? Yeah. Okay, another question. This man. Yeah, you.
I know you said like in the beginning that you guys didn't use any CG in the movie. Like, how did you do the alien?
Well, Joe doesn't like to reveal a lot about the process. I'll tell you a little bit about it. But they're essentially really there. There were only ever 2 suits, so kind of like we could only really afford to do 2 suits. And there's a guy, like a movement artist called Terry Notary, who worked on Avatar and
The Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and he's like a movement artist. Also, me and Joe met him when we were working on Tintin. He was working on that. So he's like the main performer in the suits, and another guy from his team, and then multiplied. So they're really there. And then there's some sort of like digital work on the teeth, like to make the kind of teeth sparkling, kind of fresh, and also like a what they call rotoscope, where you remove kind of definition, so there's sort of solid black. So you've actually sort of taken detail out. Is that nerdy enough for you? You want more? Oh, thank you. No, I think that sort of like, it was a long process getting it right, and I think they ended up exactly as Joe intended them. And I think it's also partly based on his cat. He has a black cat. Somewhere between his cat and the Space Invader logo. This man.
Yeah, I really like the whole idea of it being a council flat, and I wanted to know why you chose that. I grew up in a project in New York City, and I completely related to that movie. It was like my childhood fantasy of like aliens coming and attacking us. So like, how did the writers decide about a council flat? Council.
Well, Joe, who wrote it, directed it, he lives in that area, and that area is like kind of like a lot of cities where London is kind of like, you know, quite sort of mixed in its kind of, you know, sort of economic sort of scale. And the character Brewis, who's like the posh stoner, is basically the Joe Cornish surrogate. I think he would visit his local estate kind of once a week to get weed, and that's kind of like, so basically the Brewis character is Joe Cornish. But what was it, I mean, what was it like for you seeing, like, you know, when you see the finished film, what's it like seeing like your neighborhood on the big screen?
It's cool because like all those places that you saw in the film are places that I go past every day when I'm going to university, when I'm going, you know, going to drama school and stuff, and to see my ends being shown on not only a cinematic but epic scale is good to me. And the fact that it wasn't rap music playing in the background, and the fact that it was orchestral with a little bit of Basement Jackson, that to me was, you know, that was epic. And to me it feels like, you know, now we're getting a film that is totally different and that is showing, you know, the projects and like the ends in a different light. Do you know what I mean? So it was cool for me to see that.
And shown at the Arclight Hollywood.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just take a couple more questions. This lady.
Do you have anything coming along after this?
Well, 2 weeks after I finished Attack the Block, I had a 2-week break, and then I went on to do another indie film with Eddie Marsan called Junk Hearts. And that just got picked up by someone. And it should be out next year, I think.
Okay, let's take a last question. Who's got the best question? Then man about your hand is up highest.
I don't know if it's the best question, but Edgar, you have a lot of great music in your films, and this one I noticed the score stuck out for me. Is there any way you can talk about one? If you had KRS One. I mean, seriously.
Well, Joe takes all the credit for all the Source songs. One thing I will say is that he's a first-time composer, Stephen Price, who was my music editor on Scott Pilgrim, and he actually went from, there's a couple of people who went straight from one room to another, like Steve Price, and the editor, John Amos, kind of went straight from Scott Pilgrim into Attack the Block with no break, and so did Steve Price. And he was a music editor on my film, and he'd been like worked with a lot of composers, and this was his first kind of like solo composing. And then he worked with Basement Jacks, and you guys know Basement Jacks? They're from like South London, so it was kind of very fortuitous kind of idea to have them doing their first score. But also their very first gig was in Mostyn Park Road, which is the first location where like Jodie Whittaker gets mugged. Is actually where Basement Jacks had their first gig. So there's a nice kind of like sort of South London flavour to it. So I can't take any credit for any of the Source songs. That's all Joe Cornish. But like I know that like I know what his idea was. He really wanted to sort of mix like a John Carpenter-esque like electro score with orchestral bits, and I know he's really happy with the finished thing. I love it too. Moses versus the Monsters, which is the last cue, is good gym workout music.
I have a question.
Yes.
I heard that it'd be really good if you came tomorrow night, and I heard that you were thinking about it, the two of you, to make an appearance because people would join. Do you guys think that would be good? Thank you for being to that.
I guess we'll just have to see this Mercy 3D another night. But listen, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the movie. If you did, please tell your friends. Like, cool little movies like this, like they live and die on word of mouth. Don't set fire to a cop car tonight. That was a joke. But please tell your friends, and thanks for coming. We love you all.